The Trinity College Library in Dublin, Ireland, houses a 1,200-year-old volume called The Book of Kells. It contains the four Gospels, and within it are depicted the symbols of the four evangelists drawn from figures in the book of Revelation. Matthew is represented by a winged man, Mark, a winged lion, Luke, a winged ox, John, an eagle. Among the most important questions anyone could ask is, can we trust these Gospels as faithful accounts of the life and work of Jesus? Some are skeptical of the Gospels as sources for any real history of Jesus. This is due in part to a kind of gospel research known as form criticism, found in universities now for decades. Form critics usually have rejected the Gospel's claims of the miraculous. Form critics maintain that the Gospel stories and sayings of Jesus were developed over time by early believers who passed them on orally. And form criticism holds that the sayings and stories about Jesus in the Gospels actually reflect the situations and needs of the first Christians themselves, and not the facts about Jesus. The form critics maintain that these developed stories and sayings of Jesus assumed certain characteristic forms as they were told and retold. One form was already recognized in ancient times. It is called the Creia. Creae were short anecdotes about a particular person. These sometimes included a question which was answered in a notable way. Many of the Gospel stories of Jesus might be considered Creae. Form critics have held that any historical information about Jesus in the Gospel stories is limited to a kernel. Individual opinions have varied as to how large that kernel is. Rudolf Bultmann, leading form critic of the 20th century, said no real history of Jesus could be written based on the Gospels. The Jesus of history, he said, was irretrievable, lost to us. And the resurrection of Jesus from the dead?
Utterly inconceivable.
Form criticism has held its place in academia now for more than half a century, but its flaws must not be ignored. The first and worst flaw is that assumption that nothing supernatural is possible. This presupposition excludes from consideration what the Gospels themselves say. What if the Gospels are right? And are we really to think that the first and second generation believers simply made up stories about a controversial figure, Jesus of Nazareth, and no one was the wiser? Would none of the opponents of the first Christians have stepped forward in Bethlehem, Nazareth, or Jerusalem to say that none of the things reported about Jesus really happened there? What we do find is evidence that Christians attached importance to particular sites in these places from the earliest times. Places like Peter's house in Capernaum, the cave stable in Bethlehem, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Early Jewish sources admit that Jesus lived and worked wonders. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus wrote of Jesus in his Histories of the Jewish People around the year 90. Josephus penned what is now called the Testimonium. Though edited by copyists, it is widely acknowledged to have sounded much like this in its original form.
Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, for he was a doer of startling deeds, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. And he gained a following both among many Jews and many of Greek origin. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day.
An early Christian bishop, Quadratus of Athens, had this to say:
But the works of our Savior were always present, for they were genuine, those that were healed and those that were raised from the dead, who were seen not only when they were healed and when they were raised, but were also always present, and not merely while the Savior was on earth, but also after his death. They were alive for quite a while, so that some of them lived even to our day.
The first generations of Christians maintained their own distinct traditions about where the Gospels came from, the stories behind the story of Jesus. These clash with the form critics' theories. The time has come to give the old traditions a new hearing.